What's up, guys? Welcome to another podcast episode. You could find Jessica, also known as She Snaps. You could find her on Mind of Snaps on Twitter. You can also find her Twitch over at twitch.tv/She Snaps. Great conversation. Even had me crying. Enjoy. Jessica, what is up? How are you?
I'm great, man. Wait, can I swear on your podcast?
If you do, I'll just do the tweets, the tweaks of removing it, especially for YouTube and stuff like that.
Just doing a quick bleep.
But just be you, full fledged, right? And we're good. How's everything?
Really great.
Just excited to have you. Thanks for taking the time to have this conversation. There's been a lot of new faces for me experiencing, like, Twitch people and even the recent Guardian Con stuff, which was really exciting to see. I love what they're doing there, obviously, with Professor Broman. I got a chance to have a conversation with him when he was in New York, which was great. But just being here with you is exciting for me because it's always cool to find dope people online. And I always am curious how that translate into conversations like this. So welcome and glad to have you.
Well, I'm happy to be here. I just like talking to people. I get a lot of requests like this, and sometimes from people who are just launching their podcasts for the first time, or they do the podcasts on their stream, and they're like, I don't really have any listeners yet, but if maybe I build up to this point, then maybe I could have you on. And I'm like, let's just go. Like, what do I care? I like having conversations with people. It doesn't matter to me, like, how many people are going to hear our conversation. Works for me.
Yeah. It's been, for me, it's been a cool journey. And I know you're doing podcasting as well. And so let's jump into that. So when you think about podcasting now, like, what's your experience been like since you launched your show?
I think podcasting and YouTube videos, like the vlogs, are the two things that I did not expect to like as much as I do. But like, podcast is dope. It's fun. It's cool to be able to kind of have that dedicated audience without distractions, because I'm used to Twitch streams where I'm like, go, managing 5 million conversations at once. So it's really nice to do podcasts and to be able to do the structured content that I feel doesn't make sense for my streams. Like a lot of people do those like interview things, or they have, like, especially folks that do mental health advocacy online. The majority of people I know that do that, it's the focus of their streams. So you go there, you can expect to hear them interview someone. There's a certain topic. If you veer too far from the topic, they're going to bring it back at some point. And I kind of thought about doing that. We've sort of done a couple topic days here and there, but aside from the actual mental health streams that I would do usually once a month, everything else, it just doesn't fit for me. I don't want to have that structured content because I feel like I'm missing out on an opportunity to get to know someone well enough that they will trust me to ask for advice, ask for help pointing them to resources, whatever. So podcasts are dope because I can make sure that I'm getting that structured information out in a way that's very no pressure. I tried doing it with my vlogs too, having a very structured, I will educate you on some shit. And I am an awkward turtle when I'm trying to do things very structured, very professional. It just doesn't fit with me anymore,
Right.
I gave up on that very quickly, switched around the vlog content so it's more like how I actually talk, more conversational, which I think is what the main strong point of the majority of my brand is that it's chill, relatable, and conversational.
Right. So when did you decide to do the coaching stuff? Because you do a lot of coaching and in the matter of the conversation spectrum on your Twitch. When did that start for you?
When did that start? When did that start? It had to have been around November, I want to say, because I'm pretty sure that was when I got my first coaching client. And I believe that it was kind of a cool, I launched it, told people what it was about, and then got my first and second coaching clients really quickly after that. So I think it was somewhere around November.
Okay. And so far, how has that been for you?
Really cool. Because I made it clear, like, I'm not trying to be the life coach, right? Although I don't know a ton of great names. Maybe I could be like a routine coach. I don't know. So I just put it on my Patreon as coaching and conversation with like a nice heavy disclaimer, letting people know like it's mostly about goal setting. When people try to like use me as like a therapist, I shut it down real fast. Listen, I love you. Like, if you just want a friend, I'm happy to hear you out and be that person who you can tell your whole life story to. But for the purpose of like these coaching calls, that's not a great use of your time with me because I can't do anything with that. So I make sure to reiterate regularly my focus is on the here and now and moving forward. I'm encouraging people to seek help if they need it, get themselves into therapy, get themselves in with a counselor, whatever. But I just ask them, what's your day to day like? Like, what do you do when you go to sleep at night? What do you do when you wake up? What's your day look like in the middle? And then how do we work together to kind of problem solve and figure out some new ways to build in some things that, like, through my research, have been shown to be very beneficial for the majority of people. And if they stumble, if they struggle, if they fail, like, we just kind of reassess. Okay, so we've determined certain things in your mornings, they don't go well together. But you like the way you feel when you do this, you just haven't figured out a way to do it in your mornings. What other time of the day would this fit in? Like, can we shift some things around? You know, I'm just trying to help people get organized and build as many good habits and like joyful habits into their routines as I can. And so far, it has been great. I'm actually really proud because my first coaching client ever reached out and like posted on Twitter about how they didn't have anxiety anymore. And it was a very tearful call the day that it like kind of clicked because my client was telling me about how they realized, I think this was like months before that, they realized that they didn't know where they even put their anxiety medication. And I was like, I didn't even know you were on anxiety medication. And they were like, yeah, I've been so in this routine, I've been feeling so much better that it didn't even register in my brain that I used to need this like Tic Tacs, you know? So that was like the first like you don't feel that you need this anymore to the point where it didn't even cross your mind. Because of course I would never be like, you don't need your medication, don't take your pills, like would never ever do that. So it was kind of like a cool shock. And then when we wrapped up our coaching, like it was one of our final calls before we were like, look, you really don't need me anymore. You are very well equipped to kind of solve your own problems here. They were telling me about how they'd been feeling every day and how it surprised them to look back and remember all the times that they had to lay on the ground to just like get through panic attacks and how anxiety used to rule their life so much. And now like they're just feeling so great. So I just ask a question. If someone were to ask you today, if you have anxiety, what would you tell them? And they like stopped for a moment. And then like, you know, you can hear people when they're smiling. I heard the smile and then I heard the tears. And then we both started crying because they were like, I don't have anxiety. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I know how that feels. I had that. It's so cool. Like, I don't expect that to be the given or like the norm, right? Because anxiety can be so difficult to battle. But it was so cool to see that it wasn't necessarily something I did, but that through helping someone establish good routines, they were able to beat their anxiety. Like, that's the coolest feeling in the world. So this was for my first client, we recently came to terms and we're like, you are on your own, you're good, you're set, like you're gonna do a great job. And I still get updates here and there of like, hey, I used this and it helped me. Like this, I reminded myself of this thing we talked about and it helped me get through this situation. So overall, like I've had 4 coaching clients and I have nothing but positive experiences to report back. Like I'm grateful that anyone trusts me enough to open up to me in that way, to like bring me into their day to day, you know? But I'm excited to keep doing more of it, you know?
No, that's dope. That's dope. But you make it a point to be very vulnerable, you know, within reason, on your streams and stuff like that. So take me back a little bit. The journey, your journey up until this point, because you spend a good amount of time sharing the things that you've been through, and give us the comic book version of that. And yeah, so tell us about who you are, where you've come from, and where you've been, and where you're going.
All right, so we're talking origin stories here.
Yeah, let's do origin.
Okay. So like I gotta kind of rush through it, I feel like, because the backstory can be a long one.
Okay. Well, we can, if you want, we can do most of we can do the long version. I don't mind that, actually. And then at the end of the session of that particular part, we can just jump into like the video game stuff.
Okay. When I was a baby, I was abandoned by my birth mom. She left my older sister, older brother, and myself with our grandparents, which is my biological grandmother, so her mom, and her stepdad, so my essentially step grandfather. She was addicted to cocaine and was battling drugs in her mind. She didn't have a lot of love for herself, and she was always mixed up in the wrong kind of shit in like the south side of Chicago, which is where I was born. So she wound up bringing us to our grandparents' house in the suburbs to be babysat, and didn't come back. So my older sister, we were 3, 2, and 10 months, basically. I was the youngest. My older sister was born with a liver disease called biliary atresia. So she was a sick girl. Like, she needed constant medical attention, and we knew that she was eventually going to need transplants and everything. And my grandparents realized very quickly that my birth mom was not coming back, and that they had to figure something out, because with a sick child, you can't get medical treatment for them unless you're a parent or legal guardian. So my grandmother, basically, from what I understand, had already made up her mind. As soon as it was clear to her that my birth mom wasn't coming back, she was like, well, looks like I'm adopting these kids, which was crazy to think of, because her and my grandfather had just gotten married like the year before. They were close to retirement. They each had children from previous marriages. So my grandpa had 4 kids from his previous marriage. My grandmother had 3 kids, including my birth mom. So they got married, moved in together. Suddenly they're living in a house with 7 kids that are all getting close to the age of, like, getting out of school, college, all that kind of stuff. So they were almost to the end of like their parental duties. So they had a pretty cushy existence. Like, they had a houseboat, and they were traveling more, and they were newlyweds essentially at this point. So I guess my grandmother, I just recently talked to her about this, like within the last year, and asked, how did you feel when you realized that she was gone, and when did you decide to adopt us? She apparently decided like instantly, and was kind of like internally figuring out how she was going to be on her own again if my grandfather said that he wasn't down to adopt us. So she said it was like 2 weeks, I think, of just this like heavy weight on her mind of like, am I about to lose my relationship? If so, like, it is what it is. These are the kids. Like, I'm going to take care of them. But fortunately, it turns out my grandpa was the one who brought it up to her first and said, like, it's time to just adopt these kids. So they became our parents. So, like, this is where I'm going to stop referring to them as my grandparents, because it's just for, like, forming the story. It makes more sense that way.
Absolutely.
So then they never deliberately told my brother, sister, and I, like, we're your parents now, call us mom and dad. Apparently, it was, like, very hillbilly sounding for a while. As we started talking, they were being referred to as grandma and grandpa, then grandma, mommy, and grandpa, daddy, which like sounds so ridiculous. And then gradually the grandma and grandpa part fell off, and they were just our parents. They were just mommy and daddy. So my brother, sister, and I are all half Mexican. When I was younger, I had way more pigment in my skin. So like I was definitely darker. I'm very pale compared to my siblings, and even then I was still the lightest one. But like my brother and sister definitely had beautiful brown skin, like very clear that we are not white. So my mother is of German descent, like tall, blue eyes, light skin. She has darker hair now, but she was blonde when she was younger. My dad is a Swedish immigrant. So again, like we're talking about being raised by Swedish and German people as three young Mexican kids. So they kind of had no choice but to tell us pretty early on that we were adopted. They had plans to do it, I think, later in the year, but apparently one of our neighbors, like, just had heard about the fact that we were adopted and spilled the beans to us. And one of us went and asked her. I don't remember that at all, but I do remember them telling us when we were adopted because I was like 7, I think. And I remember, like, you know, when I got adopted, all of my aunts and uncles became my brothers and sisters, right? So I had been raised believing I was the youngest of 10. And there were pictures of my birth mom around the house. Like, I knew that she existed. I knew who she was in a sort of sense, but I didn't know who she was to me. Like, I thought that she was my sister, right? Because legally, that's what she became. So they decided to tell us. All my older brothers and sisters were there. I think it was Thanksgiving. And they also had a counselor there, which was cool. My parents were, I think, more progressive than I would have expected because they brought counselors in for a lot of these different processes. And I think it helped a lot. But we didn't really think anything of it. They didn't like introduce her at the beginning of the night as like, this is a counselor. This is what she does. They just like introduced her by name. And like my family has always been very welcoming. If my mom heard that one of my siblings had a friend that didn't have somewhere to go for Thanksgiving or Christmas, like they were always invited. So throughout the years, like we've always had random people at family parties and it hasn't been too shocking. So like I didn't really think anything of it. But after dinner, they sat us down and they let us know that we had been adopted and they told us the story of like what happened. And, you know, I give them credit for doing their best to come up with like a very clear narrative, despite not really knowing why she left. So they basically just told us that she was addicted to drugs and that she left us there, not because she didn't want us, but because she knew that they would be able to give us a better life. Because while she was struggling at that time in my parents' lives, they were thriving. My dad was a firefighter. My mom was a realtor. Like she was doing a great job too. She sold Walter Payton, one of his houses. So like as far as what they had set up, like they were set. It was very clear, I think, as like a young parent, they will be able to take good care of my kids. So they let us know that like she didn't leave because she didn't want you. She left because she had her own stuff and she left you with us for a reason so that we could give you a better life. I remember thinking, who cares? Like I was really young. So I'm looking around at all my brothers and sisters and I'm 7 years old and they're telling me I'm adopted. And I'm like, so, okay, can I play now? And I remember looking over and seeing my older sister crying. And like that, I can still remember vividly. I remember the outfit she was wearing. I remember where she was in our old house, like everything. And I remember just like wondering why, like, why are you even upset? Who cares? Like nothing's going to change, right? So it didn't really faze me at the time. And this counselor kind of stepped in and had us do this exercise where we wrote a letter to our birth mom to ask any questions we might have.
Okay.
I asked if she had any animals. My brother asked if she had a Nintendo. My sister asked why she left. So for, 7, 8, and 9-year-olds, that's kind of the mental difference where we were all at. Up until that point, I was a very happy kid. Like I remember always being very imaginative, like always, like I started reading really young and I was always reading. So like to till that point, everything was just hunky dory, like got no cares, After that, it was like just this notion kind of took hold and I didn't quite realize what it was until years and years later. But I started getting this idea that I was the reason why my birth mom had left because I was the youngest. So my logic was she had my sister And like she had been battling drug abuse and all of this stuff this whole time. So she has my sister. She has a sick child. My sister wasn't expected to live through the night. They had to perform an emergency surgery on her called A.K.A to reroute bile ducts to prolong the life of her liver. They said she wasn't going to make it through the night. Then they said she won't hit 1, then 5, then she won't develop into like normal, healthy adult, whatever. So I'm thinking like she had a sick child, knew that she was signing on for like a life of kind of struggle with that, but she stuck around. Then she had my brother, and same thing. Now she's got 2 young kids within a year of each other. One's sick, one's young, and like still stuck around. She had me, and she only lasted 10 months. So it was like in my young brain, it started forming like, what could it have been? What did I do? Like, I was a baby. Was I a bad baby? Did I cry a lot? Was it just 3 kids was too much? Like, did I look like someone? Like, because I didn't at the time know who my real dad was. So I'm like, did I look like my real dad? Like, what was it that made her hate me so much, or made her feel that this was too much now that she had 3, that she didn't even make it to a year with us. So after learning about my adoption and kind of starting to progress through my life, my mental health issues started to like really blossom. And when I was younger, I had a wonderful relationship with my dad towards the end of his life. He passed away in January. But he was an alcoholic, and he was a very angry alcoholic when we were younger. So he lost his job. He had to retire from the fire department because he got injured at work. And I think he had had felt a lot of pride in his career there because he had made it all the way up to lieutenant. Like he was a very like well-loved and respected firefighter. So when he lost that job, then he had to go and work at this fabric company as like the custodian, which basically he worked in this like big kind of almost like a carpet warehouse with a bunch of women, like 4 women. And he was the custodian, he was the handyman, like anything that they needed, basically, like that's what he wound up having to do. And he hated his job. Like it was very clear he did not like it. He was making money. Like it was not a great situation, especially coming from a job that he clearly felt like such a good connecting purpose to. So he started drinking more, started getting more angry, and started letting us know as young children that we were the source of like all of the problems in his life. So he was very angry. He was violent in some cases, and when he would get drunk at night, we would hear the phrase, these kids, it's because of these kids, all the time, like almost like disassociated from us, not like my kids, but these kids, it's these kids. So like that certainly didn't help, not just feeling like I'm a burden, but being told regularly that we all were, made us feel pretty understandably terrible. Having said that, like my dad did cut back his drinking a lot when he was after like we all moved out. My brother and I both managed to build a really good relationship with him, forgive him for what he was going through, because he had had a mess of a life too before that. And I didn't even hear about it until I think I was like 17 maybe, and he was crying, and I like, he did not do that very often, but he was really drunk one night and he was crying, staring out the window. And for the first time ever, he had talked about his sister who had passed away. So it was like, dude, like your mom is still in Sweden, your dad has passed away, your sister passed away, his brother was sick, like constantly, despite being like the healthiest person we knew in terms of like his habits, got like every form of cancer you can think of, wound up dying from it. It was really sad. Meanwhile, my dad was a heavy smoker, heavy drinker, and was kind of outliving his family. And I think that made it even harder on him. So it wasn't until later in my life that I started to see him as a person who was battling his own instead of kind of like this monster that was a part of my upbringing, But he was my daddy. He was a wonderful man, like at his core. So I think I was 10 years old when I had my first panic attack. I was going to a family party at my church, And like, I told you how many siblings I had at that point. They had all started having families, people, they had boyfriends, girlfriends, that kind of stuff. And we had aunts and uncles and grandparents. So like our immediate family was like 40 people or something. Like it's a lot of people. So when it came to having like bigger family parties, we tended to need to rent out space. Well, not rent out, but we used the church gymnasium / cafeteria. So I remember walking in for this family party for God knows what. And we walk in, one set of doors, turn right, and then there's another set of double doors that lead to the auditorium. So we walk in with my mom and dad and my two siblings. And as soon as we walk into the room, like I see my whole family kind of all dispersed and doing what people do at parties. They're in little groups here and there, sitting, standing, talking, playing. And my brother was just a ball of energy. So he just like rocketed off and joined my older brothers. My older sister was a sweetheart. So someone came and like grabbed her and kind of ran off. And then I just stood there and my parents had walked off to go and like make food or something. And I'm just standing in the doorway looking around. And I was looking for that like wave, like come sit here, or I was looking for someone to come and do what they had done for my brother or sister, and it wasn't happening. So that was like the first clear moment that I can remember in my life where it wasn't just like some kind of weird subconscious thing saying like, this is all your fault. But that was the first clear moment that I can remember thinking, they don't want me here. So everything started collapsing at that point. I turned and I ran like down the hallway in my church, ran into a random office, went into the closet of that office, sat down and had a full-blown panic attack and had no idea what it was. Like I'm 33, I was 10 years at the time. Like anxiety was not something that was talked about. So I had no idea what was happening. I thought I was dying, like freaked the out in this place, like shaking, crying, couldn't breathe, the whole thing, like really thought I was going to die. And after it kind of like subsided and I was just sitting there by myself in this closet, like shaking and holding myself, I was like, oh man, I can't tell them. Like I can't tell anyone because if they already don't like me, if they already think I shouldn't be here, they don't need to know that like I'm also damaged goods, right? So I struggled with panic attacks in silence. Like I didn't even tell my older brother and sister, like my biological siblings. I didn't even tell them until I was 14, I want to say. Maybe 15.
So 5 years.
Yeah, at least. Like, I know I can remember what we were doing. We were coming home from like the school bus and we were like walking across my yard. And I was like, this is the time. Just do it. Just tell them. And I told them and they were so sympathetic. They were so sweet. But I was like, man, they're going to think that something's wrong with me, right? My older sister wound up being like my main source of support when I would have a panic attack. It was like, grab Tanya. She knows what to do. She'll come and like sit with me and then I'll feel better. But yeah, I was dealing with that for a long time by myself. And it was just this kind of like slow progression of like, couldn't fake it anymore. I went from being the bubbly, happy kid, the very avid reader, the very curious person, to being very sullen and withdrawn. I stopped spending a lot of time outside of my room. I started doing drugs. I started drinking. I started smoking. Like I had my first cigarette when I was in 5th grade. I started drinking and smoking weed when I was in 6th grade. So when you're already battling like mental health issues, throwing drugs and alcohol and cigarettes at it like does not help at all. So I think that contributed a lot to my worsening symptoms. So when I was 15 years old, I got what I felt was proof that I was the reason my birth mom left. And after battling depression and everything, like anxiety, insomnia, all this different stuff for so long, that was like the straw that broke the camel's back. We were at my grandmother's house. So like remembering that my mom is who I call my mom. This is biologically my great grandmother. So we're at her house. She pulls out a box of stuff that belonged to my birth mom. And I got excited because we didn't really get to talk about her much. Like it was kind of a tense conversation, understandably so, that she was gone. We didn't, like my Nana was the one who we could ask more questions of, but that was kind of it. So we see this box and I'm pumped, like cool. I get to see things that may clue me in a little bit more about like who she was, what she was into, whatever. And we found these baby books in there. There was one for each of us. And we like, it was an exciting moment. We opened up my sister's first because she was the oldest, and it said her name on it. It had a little baby picture. And like the first thing I remember noticing is, wow, that's my birth mom's handwriting. That's so cool. And I'm, mentally like, does my handwriting look like that? Like, no, my handwriting looks like that. So I'm looking at it and just like feeling so excited as we're going through and reading these little things about my sister, how she was as a baby, seeing pictures of her with my birth mom. And I'm like, wow, I'm finally going to get some answers, because since I was 10 months when she left, I don't have a ton of knowledge of like what my life as a baby was like. There's not a ton of pictures of me as a super small baby. So there wasn't much for me to like dig into to be like, okay, so that's clear. That picture proves that she loved me. There wasn't a ton of that. So we go through my sister's baby book. It was like we're sitting around this box kind of reading it together. Then we go through my brother's baby book, and it's the same thing. It's got his name, all of her handwriting, all these cute little notes about what he was like as a baby. And then we opened up my book. All it had was my name. It was blank. So that was like my complete loss of hope. If you could represent it in like one moment in my life, it was leading up to it pretty hard, but that was the moment where I was like, proof. There it is.
And you look at that as proof?
Well, my young mind did. No,
Okay.
At this point now, like, who the knows?
Right,
She
right,
could have
right.
realized that writing baby books is a hassle when you have 3 young kids and one of them is sick. It could have been any million other reasons. But as a person who at that time was struggling with suicidal ideation and like really just hated myself, I saw that as proof. So previous to that, I had been brought to a therapist for the first time. My parents realized that things were getting rough. I was self-harming. I was like really just in a bad state. So
This is what, 17? 16,
this was
17?
when I was 15.
15?
So
Okay.
before this baby book thing, I had been seeking help finally, or I had been seeing someone because of my parents. And unfortunately, my therapist sucked. She overprescribed me so heavily that I was like hallucinating. So like to kind of give the quick rundown of that, when I first started seeing her, I was diagnosed with severe depression, anxiety, panic disorder, insomnia. ADHD was a later diagnosis, so I think that was it. So she put me on Zoloft. She put me on like, I think 50 milligrams of it. I went back over and over and over again and kept telling her over and over and over again, I don't like this. It's making it worse. I battled insomnia before, but now I just straight up cannot sleep. Like there is no chance of it. I went back to her, repeatedly kept telling her the same thing, and her response each time I told her that I was struggling was to increase my dosage. So I was 15 years old, maybe 110 pounds, and I was on pretty heavy doses of it. She had gotten me up to, I think like 150 on Zoloft.
Right. So essentially you were not getting the pill. You were the pill at that point.
Yes. Yeah. Like I was Zoloft. Yeah, exactly. So I told her like straight up, I'm done with this shit. Like I am losing my mind. I want to kill myself even more than before. If you don't take me off of this drug, I'm going to do it. And she made me, put the fear of God into me. Like, listen, if you do that, you can't quit antidepressants cold turkey. Like it will mess you up. It could kill you, all this stuff. So I'm like, okay, what do I do then? So then her solution was, we're going to just add another medicine to you. And as we bring that medicine up, we'll bring this one down. She did not do that. So at the time that I found that baby book and came to this conclusion that I was the source of all bad things in the world, and that my birth mom left because of me and all this stuff. Like my parents now had to struggle raising 3 kids when they should have been retired. It all kind of compounded. I was on 150 milligrams of Zoloft because she never brought me back down, 150 milligrams of Wellbutrin, and 150 milligrams of Klonopin. I was hallucinating because I was going without sleep for so long. I was a zombie, but a miserable, angry zombie. So when I saw that baby book and I was so horribly medicated, still battling suicidal ideation, it was like, that's it. I'm done with this. I'm out of here. Like, I could not see any version of my life that was going to turn out in a positive direction. Every way I looked, because I believed foolishly that I could predict the future, everywhere I looked, everything sucked. I would never succeed. I would never have a life that was anything less than terrible. And even though I'm sure my family's going to be sad, like, I figured at the end of the day, they'd be grateful that I was gone. They'd be happy to have one less mouth to feed. They'd be happy to have one less person sucking up their time and energy. Like, I really just felt like a burden on everyone. So the next day, I took all of my pills and tried to kill myself. My closest guy friend at the time, who's still, I'm so grateful for him. He's a wonderful human. My closest friend, Mark, came over, like, realized what was happening, came over, kicked the door down, called an ambulance, got me into the hospital. They had to pump my stomach, which was miserable. Like, it was terrible. I was very angry, very aggressive. I broke some restraints. I assaulted some nurses. Like, I was really nasty. They wound up having to, like, really bring in like 6 or 8 people. I don't know how many, a whole room full of people to hold me down so that they could like strap me in, because I was like fighting really hard to end my life that day. I got admitted into inpatient and I was there for 9 days. And throughout my time there, I remember looking around the rooms thinking, like, this is so stupid. You think that this is going to fix anything? Like, if I really wanted to, I could kill myself right now. Like, the handle on that door kind of has a weird sharpness to it. I could use that. I'm looking at, like, nurses and people going past me. Like, I could grab your pen. I could do this. Like, everywhere I looked, there was a very clear, I could kill myself here if I wanted to. Like, I could do this. I still fully intended to finish the job. Pretty much all the way through my treatment, I was like, I know how to do this. I know how to get through this. I can pretend. Like, because of my sister being sick, I was raised with the stay strong thing. So I was like, I just have to stay strong. I just have to do what we do when I'm scared for my sister and just pretend everything is okay and they'll let me out and then I can finish the job and be done with this. Because I figured if I tried it in the hospital, they'd probably be able to save me again. And lashing out didn't get me very far. I got put in like the isolation room, like the legitimate padded room, one of the times because I was acting out so aggressively. So it wasn't until maybe I was there for 9 days. So this may have been day 7 or 8. It was after a pretty decent amount of time in there. My family came to visit me. So it was my mom, dad, and my brother. And we were all kind of just we were doing what our family did, which was pretending that nothing was happening, even though we were having a conversation in my hospital room in a inpatient mental health ward. And my brother just broke down kind of out of nowhere and like dropped his head in his hands and started crying, like sobbing, saying, I just didn't know you felt this way. That was the first time. Like, we were close, but we didn't like get mushy. Like, my sister, for the longest time, if I would say I love you, she would say ditto. Like, super intense emotional stuff was not our
What do you think that was, though? What do you think that was?
That was him realizing that, like, he almost lost me. So it wasn't until like that exact moment that I actually thought, like, oh man, this might have been worse than I realized. Maybe they actually do care. Maybe they would be sad if I left. So I basically like committed at that point in my life. Death, self-harm, we're just going to take those off the table. Like, I committed to stop hurting myself because I was cutting and drinking and doing all this terrible stuff. I committed to, at the very least, stop cutting. Like, the other damaging behaviors, it took a long time to let go of. But I didn't love my life. I didn't want to be a part of it. I just said, I'll do this for you. So suicide was still something I thought of often, but it wasn't something that I would indulge as like any kind of a possibility. It was just that nagging, like, yeah, I know I could very easily, but I know that it would break my family's heart and I'm not going to do that. So that was like a major turning point for me, but I didn't want to be in my life. I just committed not to end it. you know?
Okay.
Yeah, so it was rough. So, I'm a teenager, I'm 15, hate myself, decided I'm going to stay in this life even though I think it sucks. And the next year, actually, it was crazy. When I was 16, my birth mom came back. She did it very respectfully. She sent a letter to the last known address she could find for my oldest brother, which would have been her biological older brother. And she let him know she was living in Texas. She was married. She had 3 kids. She had been clean for 12 years, but was just so filled with shame that the idea of like saying anything to us until she felt fully stable and balanced. And, she didn't know how she was going to be received. So I'm sure it was way easier, although very challenging, to just continue on with her current family and like know that we were in good hands, right? So she finally reached out, let us know all of this stuff. And my parents, again, brought us into a counseling appointment with my oldest brother, my siblings and I, and explained to us what had happened, explained that she had reached out and gave us the letter, and then basically said, like, whatever you want to do with it is fine. They kind of, like, it was clear that my mom didn't want anything to do with her, which was sad because that's her daughter, My dad, my older brother, same thing. Like, they didn't want anything to do with her. She was a very volatile person before she left, like, because as you can imagine, she was dealing with drug addiction and she was getting involved in like gang activity and stuff. So it was really rough. So they had years of really bad experiences with her. Like, my grandmother bought her a car, she sold it for drugs, like lots of really, like, she stole from them. She did all this stuff that they had a lot to heal from still. And since she had just left, they also had all of the trauma of not knowing if their daughter, sister, family member was alive or dead. My mom had tried doing like private detective searches and all kinds of things. Like, we had tried to find her, but to no avail. Like, it didn't work. So when she came back, when she sent us this letter and told us she was living in Texas, all of us were kind of just like, so what? F her. Like, good for you. You've been clean for 12 years. Thanks for telling us now. Now as like an adult and a more compassionate human than I've ever been, I can see that for what it is. Like, that had to have been so terribly hard to write that letter, to wait all those years, to know that we were there, like, so close but so far. The thing that was crazy, the way the universe works out is nuts. So she included her AOL Instant Messenger ID in the letter that she sent us. And at the time, AIM was still like the shit. So I remember, like, I went home and I put her name into my friends list, but I didn't do anything after that. Like, I kind of forgot about it. Like, I just added her to the little thing, right? And like, if you remember AIM days, people were changing names. Sometimes you'd hear the little door open thing or the little like knock knock, and you'd be like, who the f is this? What'd you change your name to? Right? So it was months after this message, this letter. So like, she is out of my head. Forgot like birth mom who, right? I'm sitting at the PC late at night on this old computer that my family had, and I hear the noise and I see this name pop up, and I'm like, who's that? So without even thinking, I just sent it a message. Hey, what's up? Who's this? And she responded, Jill, who is this? And I was like, Jill? Jill? I'm a teenager. All my friends, like, they either work with me or they go to school with me. I don't know any Jills. So she asks, who am I? And I'm like, Jessica? And we're just kind of like going back and forth trying to figure out how we know each other. And then both of us, it hit like at the same time. And she responded with, oh my God. And I was like, oh my God. So I wrote to her, I was like, my full name is, and gave her my full name. And then she was just like, holy shit. And I can only imagine what her face looked like in Texas on her computer late at night, seeing me on there. But the craziest happened. We actually wound up becoming friends through AOL Instant Messenger.
Wow.
Because that first accidental conversation gave us this freedom and almost that like anonymity aspect, you know, where we felt like kind of safe and secure, where I suddenly felt like, okay, I can ask her some questions. I can
Right.
talk to her a little bit. So we built like an online friendship. And I told my mom about it. I think maybe days later, like I was a little nervous to tell her. But I told my mom about it, and she like right away was just like, don't tell her anything about the family. Don't tell her
Mm.
where we live. Like she had all these rules. She's not allowed to come here. Like all of these things. Don't give her anything. And like to give a little bit of clarity on like part of the reason why my mom I think was especially nervous. She had struggled throughout like our whole lives with the fear that my birth mom was going to show up again and try and steal us back in the middle of the night. She had a dream one night that a white car showed up at our bus stop and stole us, and it turned out it was my birth mom. And the next day she was a mess over it. She was staring out the window watching for cars, and
Yeah.
she saw a white car by the bus stop, and she was freaked the out. So for our whole lives, like she was nervous we were going to get taken back. So I can only imagine how hard that was to hear that I was having that initial conversation with her. Um, so she she basically laid down the law like this is all the stuff. Like it's up to you if you want to talk to her, but leave me out of it. Don't share pictures, don't tell her anything. And at that point I was like, "Oh shit." I already sent her like the updated family photo, but we'll just won't tell her that. So my birth mom and I talked online for months, maybe, before she asked if we could meet.
Mm.
And at that time, I was like, I think I'm ready for this. I think I want to meet her because she had 3 kids that I was very interested in. I had seen some pictures, and you know they were 5, 4, and 3 at the time. They were little nuggets. So she flew from Texas to Illinois, and I told my mom I wanted to meet her, and again, she was like, she's not coming here. Like, she is not allowed to know where we live. So I actually had to meet her at a local mall, which was a little weird because we went to this weird, like, play area that was apparently funded by a dentist or like a dental group. So it was all like weird tooth, like, themed stuff. Like, there was a giant tooth and like a giant toothbrush and all this weird shit. But I went to this mall with a couple of my girlfriends, and they like kind of brought me there, and then we're like, all right, we're gonna go shop. Let us know if you need us. And I sat down on a bench, and not too long after that, my birth mom approached with 3 little kids, and it was just like, and the craziest thing is like, I had just found out that I had young siblings, right? They apparently knew about me their whole lives.
Wow.
So the meeting was me being like, wow, you guys are so cute. I want to smash everything. But like, who are you? You know? And they saw me and got excited and came up and ran up to me, and they were calling me sissy. And it was just like so weird. I have a picture. I can send it to you that of like our very first time seeing each other. But I sat down and had a nice long conversation with my birth mom, hung out with my younger siblings. We played a little bit. Like, it was a beautiful experience. And I actually, this tattoo, if you could see it on my wrist here, it's the coordinates to that mall where we met. My little sister got this same tattoo. And it was just to signify like when my family became a whole family. So they wound up moving to Illinois a year later. Her marriage ended, unfortunately, but she had been living in Illinois, kind of moving around to follow work and everything. And it took 2 years for her to be fully accepted into our family again. 2 years and a lot of counseling and therapy and lots of really rough situations. But eventually my mom accepted her back in. Eventually her brother and my brother accepted her back in. Now it's like nothing ever happened to a pretty good extent. Like, in fact, my mom and my birth mom are like best friends. So it's pretty entertaining because they're very similar people, as you can imagine. But now, like, my birth mom and I are really close. We launched a nonprofit together at one point. We're going to be launching another business together. My younger siblings are like one of the biggest blessings that have been ever brought into my life. They're my favorite people. They're so amazing. So it's kind of wild, right? Like, I didn't expect that. I was very grateful for it, but I still was battling my mental health even after she came back and told me, like, yeah, it wasn't your fault. Like, do you know how messed up I was at the time? Like, this had absolutely nothing to do with you. I really thought I was doing the right thing, but it killed me. Like, it broke my heart to do it. So it really wasn't until last January that I finally started to make a commitment to start feeling better.
2019 or 2018?
2018, last January.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so I basically was in like every kind of terrible relationship you can imagine because I had such low self-esteem, really hated myself despite finding out that like I wasn't the reason she left. I couldn't think of any reason to like myself. I was proud of myself because I felt like I was smart and a hard worker, but that was where it ended. Everything other than that, I was just like, you suck, you're ugly, you're trash, you're terrible. Like, just really didn't like me. So out of my longest relationships, first one cheated on me multiple times. Next one cheated on me and was abusive. He slapped me in the face the first time that I told him I loved him because I wasn't looking him in the eyes. And I thought that was like acceptable, that he was just helping me to be better and it was my fault that he did all that stuff. And then the next relationship I had was almost 9 years. And during that time, he was a narcissist and he was incredibly controlling, manipulative, very, very unkind, like really did a great job of isolating me from my friends and family. Like, I was not allowed to hang out with a ton of people. I wasn't allowed to go out and like go dancing with my friends. My friends tried to tell me several times, like, you need to get away from this dude. Like, he is bad news for you. I see how much you've changed. And every time I would just be like, no, I understand that. But like, I was caught in a cycle of abuse and they tended to, unfortunately, bring up their issues with my relationship when we were on one of the positive upswings. So like, I remember my very best friend, she wrote me like a 2-page letter, had me over at her house one day, wrote me a 2-page letter about how I was in an abusive relationship. I needed to get out. I deserve so much. She misses her best friend. Like, I'm not the person I was. And like, there were certain words, names, places that like all my friends knew. You can't mention these when we're together, when we're around each other, because he will immediately change his demeanor, change his tone, and then I'm going to hear it when I get home. Whatever it was that he was mad at me for or that he was disgusted by me for, if they hit one of those trigger words, they knew that I was going to suffer for it. So we had like little powwows before we'd hang out. I'd have to send quick, like, secret texts. Hey, remember, don't mention this. Hey, remember, don't mention this. So she wrote me this long letter saying like I needed to get out of the relationship. She handed it to me and like took off. She ran away from me in her house and was like, just read this. And then she ran. She thought I was going to like end our friendship that day, but because I was in like a more positive cycle of this really bad relationship, I was just like, oh, I understand why you would think that, but don't worry, because actually it turns out like we just had a talk about all of this stuff and like he's agreed to change. We're going to start doing all of this, so I just kind of brushed it off. His own sister, my ex's sister, called me one day and told me, you are in a cycle of abuse. Like, she laid it out clearly. You do this every couple of weeks. You are just miserable and upset and crying. And then he apologizes in some kind of happy way, says things are going to change. He's nice to you for a week and then goes back. Like, you have got to get out of this. And I was like, no, you don't understand. It's not a cycle of abuse. This is my fault. If I hadn't done all of this stuff before we dated that made him think that I was gross, then he wouldn't have reason to do this. If I hadn't done this one thing that, even though he interpreted it wrong and twisted it around and made it into something he could blame me for, then he wouldn't be mad at me. Like, I always had a great reason for why it was my fault. I started streaming on Twitch in 2015. I was amazed that he allowed me to do that, but I guess he thought that we might be able to make money off of it. So he allowed it, but he watched it like a hawk. We were still we were still living together. We were still in a really rough relationship. And like, I would try to tell him like, hey, can you just not pick fights with me right before stream? Because it's really tough to go on stream and like try and interact with people when I'm just like dragging. And he would yell at me for even daring to suggest that he do that. And there were days where I would just be in a down mood. And I had previously told him I wanted to go to a therapist or go to counseling when I was going to a community college because I was really struggling. My depression was like really kicking again. And he would mock me for it. Like, oh, I'm sure you really need to go and get help. You have so much to be upset about. Life is so hard for you. And would basically accuse me of using therapy as an excuse to try and cheat on him. So I wasn't allowed to go to therapy. So I start streaming on Twitch and I'm having hard days. And it was like this crazy shocking moment for me where I realized that on the hard days that I was having, he didn't notice. He was still doing his normal thing, but my community noticed. And that was really wild for me, for someone who had spent my entire life thinking that I sucked, thinking that like I had pretty few redeeming qualities, and most of them related to either sex or business. Having strangers tell you that they think that you're great is a trip, dude.
Yeah,
like,
it is.
That shocked me, especially when it was clear that there was no strings attached. Like I'd get random DMs from someone like, hey, I don't know if anyone has told you that you're beautiful lately, but I just want to let you know. That was it. No follow-up of like, send me feet pics, you know?
Right.
And then there were people who would ask me on those days like, hey, Snaps, are you okay? You seem a little off today. And I'd be like, holy how do you see that? And he doesn't. So it started becoming more and more clear to me, like, maybe this is not right, you know? So I started kind of sticking up for myself more, and I started calling him on his more and saying as kindly as I could, that makes me feel bad. I don't like that. Please stop that. And then I was told that I was suddenly very oversensitive and he didn't know what happened. And like, it was such a joke, the type that he used to say to me, that I was finally feeling strong enough to say like, please don't. And I tried to leave the relationship a couple times. It didn't really stick. But I finally got to a point where I was like, wow, my community, a bunch of strangers from all over the world, care more for me than the person that I have spent almost 9 years with. I got to get out of this. So I made a plan. I had my friends help me. Like, we had to do this whole executed thing to try and like end this relationship. He stole my PC to try and force me to talk to him again. Like, it was a mess, man. But I left that relationship and I announced on Twitter because no one knew that we were dating. He thought that if any guys that were watching me knew that I was in a relationship, that they wouldn't stick around, because he's basically was one of the people who believed that women exist on the internet to be looked at or as like the male fantasy of like, maybe I could get with her kind of. So I wasn't allowed to tell anyone that we were dating. So when I broke up with him and kicked him out, I took 2 weeks off and just put out like a blanket tweet and was like, hey, I'm gonna need to take a break. I'm dealing with some stuff in my personal life. I don't know exactly when I'll be back, but like, I'll let you know. And as people in this amazing community tend to do, I had a lot of people reach out and say like, hey, I don't know what's going on, but if you need anything, I'm here for you. One of the people who reached out was someone who I had developed a really nice friendship over the years. Myself, him, and another one of our friends had a running like Monday date where we would get on and play what we called Trials of Chill Cyrus. And it was like, we're going to play Trials, but not seriously. Like, I did Trials carries the rest of the weekend, and then Mondays, it was like, it's Trials of Chill Cyrus night. It's me, Money, and Dopa, and we're just going to smoke and drink and be ridiculous and expect to not win a lot. So one of the people who I had those recurring dates with reached out, and we kind of started talking more. It happened like out of nowhere. Suddenly we realized, holy crap, we have a lot in common. Like, even more than what we realized when we just gamed together. We started to like really connect, and it was this like, damn, is there something here? Holy shit, that's weird. So we started dating. He was living in Arizona at the time. I was living in Chicago. We dated long distance for a couple of years, and then he wound up moving out here last January, so 2018. So like this was all one big circle back to January was the first time where I started to actually focus more on like my mental and physical health. And it was because first he introduced me to meditation, which was amazing. And I think it was because of meditation that I was allowed an opportunity to be more introspective in a less judgmental way. And I kind of noticed my own behaviors. I realized that I went from being the person tiptoeing around my own house because I was living with an angry narcissist to being the person who was angry, and now he had to tiptoe around me. And I wasn't lashing out at him or anything like I had to deal with, but it became clear that in the mornings when he woke up, he had to come out, and he didn't know if he was going to see me smiling and happy to see him, or if he was going to come out and see me slamming cabinets, mad at myself over something dumb, throwing shit around, just throwing little temper tantrums. So it was like a real slap, like, holy shit, I'm the angry person in the house now. I thought I was the well-balanced one. So then I realized, like, I have to do something about this. Like, that was, like, final straw for me. I felt like I was polluting my boyfriend because he was so even keel, so chill, so sweet, very considerate, like, really had never struggled with his own mental health in the past, had a good family life, like, the whole thing. And all my stuff is a mess, right? So I'm thinking, like, this poor man, like, he had no idea what he was getting into with me. And now I feel like I'm just poisoning, like, I'm just toxic to his life. So I had that like awareness of like, I gotta change something. I'm sick and tired of feeling like, I'm sick and tired of feeling so angry. I feel like even worse when I'm already angry, mad at myself for being angry. And then I see him and he's kind of like hiding from me. And then I get even more mad at myself for not being able to control myself and for making his day bad. So that was like the real turning point for me, where I went from being someone who talked about my mental health openly and saying like, hey, you're not alone. I know what it feels like to be miserable, but not really having any kind of answers, to being like, okay, this, I'm so tired of it. I will do whatever it takes to fix this. So I just started Googling. Like, I just poured myself into research. I looked up how to manage anxiety, how to manage depression, how to handle anger, like all these different things. I got obsessed with listening to podcasts and reading books and watching TED Talks and watching anything I could find.
So you went back to your first love, because you used to love doing that.
Exactly. The only reading I had done in between, like when I was younger and that point, was the occasional like books, like fiction. I really liked Dean Koontz books. I would read those. I read the Harry Potter series. But other than that, like the idea of reading like a self-help book, that's some stupid right there. Like, would not have done it. I thought that people who were positive were full of because I'm like, no one's that happy. You. Like I had zero faith that anyone felt good. I believed everyone who seemed to feel good was faking it the way that I had to. Like, this is just a part of life. You're miserable, but you're doing a better job faking it. But don't give people false hope by trying to tell them that things can get better when they're not going to. So yeah, I poured myself into my research, and now it's been, a year and 8 months. Holy shit, this year has flown by, of me dedicating the time to myself. And I can very comfortably say now I'm happy. I don't have depression. I don't have anxiety. I don't battle panic attacks. I had insomnia all the way up until I was 32, 31, and I don't have insomnia anymore. I actually sleep very well through the night. I have energy for my days. I have hope for the future, and it's still crazy to me. Like when it's cool to me that I've been online through this process, because I never thought it could be possible. I really didn't. If you had told me the snaps that started streaming as She Snaps in 2015, like, hey, guess what? In a few years, you're going to be traveling around the world. You're going to be talking to people about mental health. You're going to be coaching people, helping them create routines that help foster better mental health. You're going to be happy. You're going to be in a healthy relationship. Like, none of that. I would have said, F you. Like, you're so full of it. If someone had tried to get me to meditate years ago, I don't need that hippie. Like, get that out of here. I'm a realist, and the real life is a hard life. Like, I'm glad that I was streaming when I realized I needed to change, because people who have been a part of my community for a long time remember the angry snaps. And now they see this totally new, free version of me, and they're like, wow, okay, she's not full of shit, you know? So it's so cool that I have kind of like that backup where I can say, like, look, you don't have to believe me. I would have thought I was full of shit. Go back. Look at some of my other videos. Look through my tweets, dude. You will see how angry I was. I had a bone to pick with everyone. And because I was so angry, I felt like the right way to handle that anger after I got on Twitch was to use my platform for good. But I did it very aggressively. So I'm combating sexism and racism and bigotry, but I'm doing it by being a total and complete, doing the whole quote RT thing on Twitter whenever someone said something I disagreed with, knowing full well that the community is going to go in and talk. It wasn't coming from a place of understanding. It was like, I'm right, you're wrong. You. So, like, if you look through my tweets from years ago, wide difference.
Do you
like,
want me to?
If you feel like it, bro, like, it's gonna be a mess. You're gonna see like some stuff where absolutely, like, it's accurate. The way that people are treated on this platform is like, there's so many different things that it is right, absolutely, to be upset about them. It's right to want to call them out. But the way that I was doing it and the way that it was impacting my mental health was terrible. My boyfriend used to come out and see me on the couch, like, in my phone, and he'd be like, baby, no. And I'd be like, no, it's okay. I just have one more thing to say to this person, and then I'm going to put this away. And he would come back out another couple hours later, and I would just be angry and just that, just responding with the meanest, most aggressive way I could to try and prove to people that they were wrong and I was right, So it was just not great. I was definitely not a great social media presence to follow at that point. But unfortunately, like, it worked, right? Negativity breeds negativity. Other people who feel like are going to be happy to find someone else who kind of they can relate to. But yeah, like, someone asked me once if I was going to delete those tweets, like, go through and like clear out my profile from the person I once was. And I was like, nope, keep them, leave them there, because I want everyone to know that, like, that's where I came from. I when I say I can relate to being so angry that I felt just like this simmering, boiling rage all the time, I want you to see it so that you can see the difference between that and my tweets now and see, like, I'm not lying when I say that I'm happy and that I created this for myself. This is a process that you can see through my footage, you can see through my social media, you can see through the way I carried myself. So I'm very grateful that it was all stuff that I did kind of publicly, But man, I would not have seen this coming. Life is crazy.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's like the TLDR of the whole thing, and that's an hour of it.
I love it.
And there's so much more, but it's just not even worth it, That's the main points of, like, moments. Huh. Good moment,
No, that was amazing. Thank you for really taking the time to share that. One of the things that I recently heard on your podcast, it's probably one of the earlier episodes where you were talking about life's purpose, right? Mm-hmm. And you went into saying, okay, so make sure you write it down, take the time to do that, and then, look at it every day so you know exactly what you're doing for the world and even for yourself, right?
Yeah.
So you go into that whole thing. So now that your journey is your journey, and it's an amazing journey. I loved every minute of. I was tuned in. I was dialed in. I was like, wow, this is, and now that we're here and you're serving a lot of individuals through the talks that you have, as well as your Twitch channel and everything else that you're doing and the coaching stuff. So looking at life now and moving forward, how do you inspire individuals to make sure that they're aware of their purpose to do the things that they need to do for the world?
It's all about, like, so I have affirmations that I use to remind myself of who I am, kind of like I do with that whole life's purpose thing, my mission statement for me. And one of the things that I do when I sit down to stream every day is I tell myself, I am confident, I am articulate, I connect to people daily, I help people connect to themselves daily. Like, that's really all I'm trying to do. I want to project the confidence that I genuinely feel right now. And I want to make sure that I'm saying the things the way I want to say them, right? So, like, the articulate aspect kind of matters. And then I connect to people daily. I want people to feel connected. I want them to see that even though all I see is a username, I also see that there's like a person there, and I want them to feel good, and I want them to know that I don't have to know much about you to love you and to want you to feel good. And then the last part was like I help people connect to themselves daily. It's super important to me that people know that happiness is an internal thing, not an external thing. Like I like to define it kind of as a separate thing from joy. Happiness is your internal state. It's what you start as before life starts piling on top of it. Joy, yeah, joy is something you seek outside. But if you are expecting anything in your life to bring you to that point of happiness, whether it's your job, a financial situation, a relationship, whatever, you're not going to find it. Any happiness that can be brought into your life by something external can also be taken from your life if you lose that external thing. So, my goal is always to try to encourage people to connect to themselves. And I just ask as many questions as I can, let them know my own experiences, how, stifling myself did nothing, actually did worse than that. But when I finally started looking inward, I feel like I came face to face with the truth. And that's that at our core, we truly have nothing but this beautiful, loving energy there. We start out as happy kids. We really do. I don't know anyone who maybe, a lot of us have friends or people who have been diagnosed with depression at young ages, but there was a point in your life before everything else started with you where you felt good, where you were just happy and curious and you wanted to explore and poke things. And then stuff started changing. People started saying, don't ask too many questions. Raise your hand when you have a question. People don't like it when you do these behaviors, so make sure you do these things. We started to create this sense of self, and our sense of self came from the way we were talked about by others, came from the way that we interacted with other people. So we don't really get a say in our sense of self when we're really young. It gets decided for us, and then we kind of just have to ride that wave and try and figure it out along the way. And I think that sucks. So I like reminding people, like, look, this is a part of you. You have been happy before. It's still there. It's just buried. It's buried under external pressure. It's buried under thoughts that weren't yours to begin with. They came from people around you. They came from TV. They came from whatever, but they're not your thoughts. And the thing that I hear the most with people is like when they say they don't want to do this, they don't want to do that kind of hard look in. So many people are scared that what's going to happen is they're going to look inward and realize that it's all dark. And it's not. That darkness is external. It may be exacerbated by your own internal reaction to it if you haven't learned to separate yourself from it. But I fully believe that if you do enough digging and if you have these good behaviors and you maybe with the help of a trained professional, connect to yourself, you will see that we are all just this beautiful, pure, loving energy. Like that is what we are made of. Like, do you have kids?
Yes.
So the feeling that you had when you saw your kid for the first time, that overwhelming, heart pounding, like anything in the world for this kid, that is what you are. That feeling, that's it. That's you. Everything else is just piling on top of that, making it feel like you're disconnected from who you are. So we have this constant battle between who we really, really are at our core and who we feel like we're supposed to be. So it's no wonder we feel like all the time. Like we're in this inner turmoil. Yeah. It's terrible. But as you start kind of peeling away those layers, you start really seeing that like, holy shit, this world is a beautiful place. Holy shit, I have so much to be grateful for. Holy shit. Even in the midst of a messy situation or in the midst of sadness, I can still be happy. And that's a hard thing to kind of grasp, is the idea that you can be sad but still be happy. you will still experience your normal human emotions, anger, happiness, sadness, all this stuff, or anger, joy, sadness, whatever, but it's not who you are anymore. You are happy. You are you. And at that core, it's happiness, it's joy, it's love. So the best example I have of this is in January when my dad died. He died unexpectedly from a stroke. Heartbreaking. Like, you know, I had a complex relationship with him, but I loved him very much. And towards the end of his life, we had a wonderful relationship. Like we really had a good thing. So it was awful to lose him. But that time that I took off of streaming to kind of process it was the first time I had ever had to go through a loss while in a good state of mind. And that was genuinely shocking to me, to be in it, to be grieving for the loss of my dad, grieving for all of these moments that would never happen now, but be happy and grateful and still smile and joyful and not feel like my smile meant that I wasn't sad for losing my dad, you know? So I meditated, I listened to my soothing music, I had my candles and incense a lot. Like, I had a very peaceful internal week. I didn't watch really any TV or movies. I didn't veg. I sat and just kind of sat with myself. I cried more out of gratitude than out of sadness in that 2-week period, because every time I would notice my mind kind of doing that whole, you know, what if thing and like thinking about the future, like he's not going to be here for this. And then my brain would start making me feel bad about this future situation, and it would kind of continue to compound. I was able to quickly redirect that, and instead of focusing on all the moments he wasn't going to be there for, I would bring it back and just challenge myself to think of something that I was grateful for with him. So I would think about like little moments we had and daddy-daughter dances. And that was shocking. I felt so much joy and gratitude, and still do. But I was sad. I was grieving. So it's that experience that really like brought that point home for me. Like, holy I'm happy. I'm a happy person. But I'm currently experiencing grief. It's not my whole existence. It's not my whole day. It's something that kind of comes and goes. But it's something that's real, that deserves to be explored, that deserves to be examined. But I don't have to identify with it. Just because I'm grieving, just because I'm sad, doesn't mean that that's all that I am. And that's how it used to be.
Man, you got my eyes going over here. What are you doing? Oh, man. What are you doing to me?
It's a lot, man. It's a lot to process.
Why are you doing this? Oh, man.
Onion cutting ninjas everywhere.
What are you doing?
But that's the truth of it, man. Like, some of these feelings that we have, the problem isn't that we're having them. The problem is that we're identifying with them. We are seeing ourselves as them instead of knowing that we are this beautiful, happy human that is experiencing normal human emotions. So, like, now after all this time of like my meditative practice too, I've gotten to a much better point where I feel like I really get to see these thoughts coming before I become my thoughts. And I'm trying to help other people see that they can do the same thing. You can have anxious thoughts, angry thoughts, sad thoughts without becoming anxious, angry, or sad. You can see them, explore them, examine them, feel the feelings that accompany them without becoming them. So I still have angry thoughts, but when I see them now, I have something I can do about it. I can see these angry thoughts and be like, hold on, I'm not angry. I have no reason to be angry. Let's explore this. Let's figure out where this anger came from or this angry thought came from. I dissect it a little bit and I figure out, okay, so it's not even just anger. It was just frustration. It was overwhelm. It was whatever. I can label it a little bit clearer. And then I have something actionable that I can do with that. Okay, having lots of angry thoughts. I'm going to go take a moment. I'm going to take some deep breaths. I'm going to think about something that brings me joy. Whatever my like routine is for when I'm noticing an influx of these thoughts and I know that if I don't do something, I will get carried away with them. Like, I do it. If I notice those anxious thoughts, I use my affirmations. I remind myself what's going on in the moment. I ground myself in the present. Like, There's lots of things we can do to establish that initial connection to ourselves and then maintain it so that when we experience these normal human emotions, we don't lose ourselves in them. And that's what I'm trying to share with people. That's what I'm trying to bring to them is like, yeah, some of these things are a real pain. Depression, chemical imbalances. Like, I'm not going to deny that all of that is the case. But your brain is so powerful. Your body is so powerful. And with the right assistance, with the right professional help, with the right medication, with the right routine, maybe a combination of all of those, you can get to a point where you can be separate from it, where you can start to build healthier habits, healthier thought processes, healthier routines. And, you know, we know that the brain can heal itself, right? Like, the fact that the placebo effect exists is crazy. The nocebo effect is crazy. So when people tell me that they've been told before, like, you're going to have this forever, you're just always going to be battling your mind, I'm like, I was told that too. Like, I had a chemical imbalance. I don't know if I still do. I have no idea. I haven't gone and, like, you know, done some MRI scan or anything, but I feel great. Like, does that help at all? It's not, I'm legitimately a happy person now. And I don't feel like I need to look over my shoulder when I say that. Like, when I first told my stream, like, this is wild. The first time I actually told my stream I'm happy, like, said those words out loud, I was like, whew, this is weird. This is weird. And I told them, and the overwhelming response that I got broke my heart. People were like, hey, I just want to prepare you, like, this feeling might not last. Like, everyone was worried that when I said I was happy, I was setting myself up for failure and that my crash, my come down was going to be so much harder. So I had so many people reaching out like, I hope this doesn't come across the wrong way, but listen, like, if you're feeling good now, just don't be upset if that goes away. And I had to tell him, like, look, you know why I have so much confidence that this isn't going to go away now? Because I know how I got to it. I didn't find my happiness around me. I found it in me. So as long as I continue these habits that allow me to stay connected to myself, stay real with myself, like, take good care of my body, take good care of my mind, it's not going away. And even if it does, I now know how to get back to it. You know, after years and years and years, like a lifetime of hating myself, if I could connect to that happiness that's at my core once, I can do that again. Like, I want to have kids one day. The idea of postpartum depression scares me a little. Like, I'm not going to lie. Knowing that I have had depression through such a large part of my life scares me that someday my hormones are going to get all twisted up and, you know, like, it might be out of my control to a certain extent. That idea is a scary one for me. But even that, when I think about it, like, what if someday I develop postpartum depression after having a kid? The first thing I think of is, like, I'm going to see it. I'm going to feel it because I pay attention to my thoughts and feelings really closely. And even if somehow I don't notice it, I finally have an amazing and supportive relationship. He will notice it. He will know to either guide me back into my good routines again, my good behaviors, or he will know to say, look, it's the time, like, we got to get you help. So the idea that there's like this little rain cloud following me around is gone, and I'm so grateful for that. But it breaks my heart to think that so many people, as soon as they start feeling good, there's almost this dread that builds up with it. Like, yeah, you're feeling good, but something's going to break, dude. Like, any person I know who has a period of good luck, they knock on wood, right? Yeah. Oh, I haven't had any issues with this, knock on wood. Like, they're terrified to speak that kind of positive, like, experience out in the world. They're terrified to admit or acknowledge their abundant life because they think that's an invitation for it to all come crashing down around them. And that's terrible. It's terrible that we as a society think that happiness is unlikely, you know? Especially when it's something that I think we all have the ability to connect to. I like the face you're making.
No, I love it. I love it. I love it. Man, the time went by, didn't it?
I'm trying not to be verbose, but I'm like so passionate about this. I think it tends to turn into something where I'm like, and on that
No,
note, gotta say,
it's great. It's great. No, because I know we kind of block off a particular amount of time. But I didn't want to stop because the story is so your story is so amazing.
yeah. And I
Your
mean,
story, not the story. Your story is so amazing. I have to be very specific there.
thank you. I mean, I have my next appointment is in 45 minutes.
Okay, so then we can jump in game talk and then kind of wrap.
Sure thing. If you had any other questions about any of the story stuff, like I told you before we started, I'm an open book. I'm happy to talk through any of it.
No, I think I wanted the story to be its thing. I wanted to make sure that I didn't say much when you were going into that. And it's powerful, aside from us crying and all that. That was cool. No, I think everything that played out in there was an amazing documentary type thing, and even saying that, have you considered doing a documentary for your life?
So it's weird, right? Because like every time I tell people about my story, I get pity a lot. I get a lot of people who feel bad for me and who, say like, "Wow, that must have been so hard," especially because like we didn't even talk about some of the other stuff that was really tough, like the loss of my sister, because she passed away 11 years ago, and that was like one of the worst things I've ever experienced. But like I get a lot of the interest, I guess. And then every time it happens, I'm like, I don't know, man. Like I feel so grateful. I feel blessed. I feel like playing up all of the downsides to my life and doing something like documentary style is doing a disservice to people who actually had hard lives, which is weird, right? Because I struggled,
Yeah,
but it's
yeah,
a
it's
strange
weird.
feeling, right? Because I see it and I'm like, for the most part, I had food on the table. I didn't have to worry about whether our house was going to be there the next day. I wasn't, although my family struggled with money and everything, I wasn't worried about where my next meal was going to come from. Like my parents worked very hard to do as much as they could for us. And I know a lot of people didn't have that. And even with like my dad going through a period of time where he was really angry and abusive, after that, like he was kind of a hands-off dad, but like compared to some of the people have dealt with, it was nothing. Like we still had our mom who was very loving. Like admittedly, she has her own like we all do that she needs to work on. But for the most part, like we've had a decently loving support system around us. So it makes me feel almost guilty for thinking that I had a hard life when I feel like I still had it so much better than so many people. Like I came from the south side of Chicago into the burbs. If my birth mom hadn't left, like they drove us past the apartment building we lived in once. And like it was a sketchy area, man. Like my life might have been way different if she had stuck around. Maybe then I would feel more validated. Like, yeah, this is something I should share with people, in that kind of context. But I wasn't worried about my friends not showing up to school the next day because of shootings or gang violence. Like it was uncomfortable being only a handful of non-white people in a very white area, but even that wasn't that bad. So I'm like, I don't know. I think it's going to come out through the things that I do no matter what. Like, the more I talk about my story, the more stuff like this happens, podcasts and whatnot. But the idea of doing like a documentary about my it's just like, eh. You can ask me and I'll tell you, but like, I just don't know where the value is in that unless this is after I've like really achieved and like accomplished and have a really good message that I can share. But still, that's the problem, right? So right now, like in my life, I'm still not in a position of stability. Like mentally, yeah, dope, feeling great. Financially, still struggling, still trying to dig myself out of all of the shit that happened because I hated myself and didn't have a good home life, like with my exes and everything. So I went from being completely overwhelmed by everything that was wrong in my life to still having a lot of that wrong, but just being able to say, like, in this moment, I'm okay. I will continue to work through this and figure it out, but I'm not going to let it impact me all the time. So when I think about maybe doing like a documentary or something, that's like when I'm a multimillionaire, when I have more organizations that are helping people, when my Happy Week mindfulness retreats have launched, when I have my books released, when I am able to say, like, not only did I come this far with my mind, but with my business, with my relationship, with my family, all of that. Like, the way I see it is I want to be able to feel like the total package, you know?
Okay. So I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna see how I want to phrase the question. So isn't that kind of like holding off impact? Because for example, as we're talking here, the story, the whole narrative that you gave of your life, right, is going to impact somebody in some way, shape, or form that we may never speak to, because that's how people listen to podcasts. Be like, oh wow, that really blessed me, but they don't tell you.
Yeah.
Most people don't, right? So isn't that kind of like holding off impact? Not necessarily saying you need like the full production of the 5 to 20 million budget for the documentary and all that stuff, but your story is very impactful. Like, it impacted me just listening to it here, and I know someone's gonna be touched by it when they listen to it on YouTube or podcast feeds and stuff like that.
It's not like I'm quiet about it, so I guess that's the distinction. Like, the idea of investing time and money and getting into like creating some kind of documentary when like I'm still trying to pay my bills, and that is just, it doesn't seem like a rational thought, like a rational direction to take. But like, I keep all of this stuff out there. Like, I tell everyone my when I would do my mental health streams, when I do them on a monthly basis usually, I used to do the full story, kind of. I used to go A to B, here's what happened, starting with abandonment, leading all the way up until that January when I was finally like, enough is enough. So I kind of condensed it a bit. And now when I speak and when I do my mental health streams and stuff, it's 4 lessons and 5 steps. So 4 lessons I've learned throughout my life, and then 5 steps to better mental health. The stuff that I did that helped me to start feeling better. So it's not like I'm withholding my story. I tell people all the time. I talk about it all the time. I think it's maybe even discussed in that podcast on the 5 steps to better mental health. I don't remember. I think it's on my YouTube. Like, most people, I think, that have been around my community for a while especially already know like the whole thing. Everyone else, like, because I'm such an open book, I talk about aspects of it on and off. I talk about like the longer details of it if people ask. But yeah, like, going and creating this separate thing right now of like, let me tell y'all my story. For me, I'm imagining everyone saying like, why do we care? Who are you? So I want to get the who are you part really locked down. And then we'll see where things take us, I'm not opposed to it, but right now, like I said, it would be like, let me show you how far I've come mentally. But then they'd be like, okay, but how are you doing elsewhere, like otherwise? And I'm like, well, I'm broke as I'm real tired of being broke as but I'm digging myself out. It's okay. Like, I have accepted it. I've gotten to a really fun, non-attached point where like we had a random scare at the house semi-recently where we thought that there was like a gas leak. It turned out to not even be gas. Like, it's one of those weird things, your brain makes strange associations. I had a light that was on in my office that had started melting. So it was like burning plastic that we actually smelled, which was scary. After we like called and had someone come in with a little doohab to make sure that there was no gas, they were like, so that doesn't smell like gas. That actually kind of smells like burning plastic. I was like, oh, snap. So we went in and saw that it was the little light head thing and that it was kind of like melting apart. And if we hadn't caught it when we did, like, it was in my stream room. You can only imagine how quickly could have gone wrong there. But like, my boyfriend and I grabbed our animals. We grabbed our 2 dogs and our cat. And when we thought it was gas, we evacuated. Like, we got out of the house. We went and sat in the car. And we're sitting in the car looking at this house that means a great deal to me and kind of always has. And we're looking at it. And in a moment, I had this thought of like, what happens if it is a gas leak and like the house starts on fire? And it was the first time ever where that thought crossed my mind of like, you could lose everything. And I was just like, I mean, it would save me from having to clean out the basement. Like, legit, I wasn't even tripping about it. I was just like, okay, everything could be washed away today and I would be okay. I got my man, I got my pets. Like I had my like we had the very basic things we really needed and that was it. And like this whole mental health journey and everything that I've gone on has gotten me to a point where like the idea of starting over, the idea of losing everything, like it just really doesn't faze me. So I'm grateful for that, but I also know that like externally, it's not a good look, you know, to be like, "Oh, so you're still in debt, you're still battling all this stuff." Like there's so many different aspects of your personal and business life that still need to be sorted out. And then when it comes to like the success level, like I'm very proud of where my community has grown to. I'm very, very proud of like the Twitch and everything. But comparatively, if we're talking about people who have made an impact, you know, people who have these like crazy large audiences, I'm at like 85,000 across Twitch, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, like the whole. Some of my friends have 85,000 like comments on their photos, you know?
Right.
So when I look at it again, I'm like, people don't know me yet, and that's okay. I'm not bothered by it. When they do, we'll see if something like this is appropriate, because at that point, I will know that like I have my bills covered. So not only can I offer some feedback on how you can work on your mind, I can also encourage them like, look, I know what it feels like to be in a situation where you're facing what's something that seems insurmountable, but you can be facing that mess of and still feel good while you're doing it. You know, like the people who are, I'll be happy when I'm out of debt. I'll be happy when my school payments are done kind of stuff. Like I'm still in the midst of nothing in my life is perfect, but I feel great. So I'm happy to share that. But yeah, like the documentary thing, it would be like, okay, good job on your mental health, pat on the back. Everything else is a show. When are you going to fix that? You know?
Okay. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. That's
It's
fair.
okay.
Okay, so it's okay. So yeah, so games, right?
Video games.
We love games. Games are dope. Destiny. Playing a lot of that. How about you?
Yeah. Destiny is what brought me to Twitch,
Nice.
which is my
Nice.
favorite thing about the whole thing, that I get to tell people that Destiny brought me to my closest friends. Destiny brought me to Twitch. Destiny brought me to my boyfriend. Like anyone who's not a gamer is like, wow, Destiny? It was all from Destiny? And I'm like, yeah, but like it's a game, not like, you know, Destiny. It's a video
Right.
game that I like to shoot at people in.
Right. Right. So what's your main and what's your loadout and stuff?
Oh boy, I am a hunter, night stalker. I'm right now rocking Austringer, Wishbringer, and a fancy sword that I can't think of the name of it. I can like throw shit at people with it, which I like. It's one of the exotics.
Yeah.
As far as like loadout and everything, when I first started streaming and when I first got into Destiny, I was the person that like did everything. I had 3 characters. I ran all of them through everything. And then as I started streaming, like it became harder and harder for me to keep up with that kind of stuff because I got multiple platforms, people trying to play everywhere. So one of the people who I had those monthly or Monday Trials of Chilcyrus dates with started taking over the work for all of my characters. So he runs my hunter through raids, through the nightfalls. He does all PvE related activities for me and even does some PvP related activities for me so that when I hop on to play, I can just hop in and shoot people with the best gear. Because all I want to do, really, like I liked the other stuff, but not that much. I liked
Right.
it, but I did it because I had to. Any FPS game I've ever gotten, I'm always like, multiplayer, let me go and shoot at people. That's all I want. So that's all I do. I hop on, I play Destiny. I forget like what my loadout is. I don't take it very seriously anymore, but I just love the game. Like I was definitely more of a tryhard when I first started. I was in Destiny sweats. Like I was in competitive clans. I did some like tournaments and I loved doing like trials carries. Now, like I can't tell you the last time I made a call out in a game, you know, actually like said anything or did anything. I'm a terrible team player. I just want to hop in and shoot at people and talk to my community. My focus is almost always on my chat now. So some days I'm kind of in the zone and I beast out a little bit, but most days I'm like halfway in the game running into walls and then mostly like with my chat laughing and talking. But I love it.
Yeah, it's a great game. It's a great game. I have a lot of fun playing it now, and the cross save stuff that's happening. You're a PC already, right? So I'll be jumping on PC a little bit for October, so I'm excited about that.
What a difference, dude! Holy.
Yeah, that's what I've been hearing. So the 60 frames and all that good stuff. I do
feel
notice
like
the difference.
you're just like flying, especially if you play like an agile class. What do you play as?
Well, right now I'm working on my Titan, but Hunter is what I usually use on the PlayStation.
Yeah, you're gonna feel like you're flying. And then when you go back and play on console, you're going to be like, why do I feel like I'm running through mud? Like, it feels weird. It's strange.
It does. But I mean, I'm just excited for the conversation that we had. I'm really excited. And even the part where you mentioned that a lot of individuals who are strangers would give you compliments from afar. That's what I did. And it's like, yeah, you're dope. You're amazing. That's how we got here. But I just wanted to say thank you, for taking the time to come. I'm not going to take too much more of your day, but I really enjoyed the conversation. And any parting words and also all your plugs where people can find you, anything that you want to add before we wrap.
Any parting words? Create a routine. Like our lives are really made better by routine. So create a routine for yourself that helps you prioritize your body and your mind over everything. Because if you're not the best version of you, you're not going to be the best employee. You're not going to be the best business owner, husband, wife, brother, sister, whatever. Like all of your relationships, everything improve when you do. All of it. People from my community who started on these nice routines and started finally prioritizing and taking care of themselves. It's a running thing. People get promotions out of nowhere. Someone just announced it again yesterday in chat that they had gotten approached by their bosses like, hey, your attitude's great. You're showing up more on time. Like you're getting more stuff done. We're really enjoying it. Here's more money. So like we have proof of it. Everything in your life changes when you do. So prioritize that because it makes a massive, massive difference. Aside from that, I triple dog dare you to try meditation if you're not doing it already. Mindfulness meditation is my shit, but there's lots of different types. Research, pick one, try it, see where it gets you. And I think that's it. I think that's the main thing. Just manifest some dope in your life,
And where can we find you? I know people can find you already, but where the new people, where can they find you?
The only thing that is still She Snaps is my Twitch. Actually, my Twitch and my Patreon, which is where the coaching and like photography and other random mindfulness things are. Like I did some affirmations recordings and stuff like that. So all of that is either twitch.tv/She Snaps or patreon.com/She Snaps. And then everything else is all Mind of Snaps. So Twitter, Instagram, the podcast, and the YouTube, all of that is Mind of Snaps.
Awesome. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me, man. It was good talking to you.